David, can you tell me a little bit about your risk management experience?
Yes, thank you very much for having me. I am the risk doctor, and my passion, my focus is on helping people to manage risk wherever they encounter it. And the reason I do that is because, in my view, risk management is the one thing that makes a difference between success and failure. I've been doing this for over 25 years, working on every continent, in every industry type, large companies, small companies, charities, and right down to village elders in Africa, trying to apply these things because nobody plans to fail, everybody plans to succeed, and the difference between success and failure is unmanaged risk, things that we didn't see coming that we could have seen coming. And so my passion for risk is around the idea of it's the one thing that makes a difference between success and failure in business, in projects, and in life at large. And so I hope to share some of that passion through these videos.
Surely having a good risk management process is enough in itself.
Yeah, that's a very common, common feeling. The process, of course, we want to focus on the process, and you get a process in place, everybody follows the process and the thing works, except that it doesn't. And constantly we're finding that projects are still failing, they're delivering late, they're over budget, they're not giving the full scope, they're not creating the benefits. Why is that? Surely we should have foreseen those risks and the process should have helped us. What we forget is that the process is a framework and it's operated by people, not by robots or computers or machines, but people run the process. So every step of the risk management process is a person's intervention, a person's judgment, a person's opinion or perspective. So how much risk should we take? What are the risks? How big are they? What should we do? Those are all personal opinions. And the people run the process. If we don't understand how people respond to risk, then our process is going to be ineffective.
What is it that drives these responses to risks?
That's a very interesting question because people are very complex. We're not just machines or we're not rational actors. We actually have a whole range of different things that influence us. And one of the things that's most important is the way that we feel about things, our perspectives, our view. So what we see outwardly in terms of behaviour comes from attitudes which are inside. In fact, there's an ABC. Attitudes create behaviour and repeated behaviour creates culture. So if we worked backwards in terms of risk and we wanted a risk-aware culture or a risk-mature culture, then we need to act properly towards risk. So our risk culture comes from repeated behaviour, but the behaviour comes from the way that we think and feel about risk. So risk attitude is actually the thing that drives how people behave towards risk in our projects, in our businesses, and in fact in life in general.
So what do you really mean then by risk attitude?
Most people, when they think of risk attitude, just have two or three phrases in mind. So risk averse, risk seeking, risk tolerant, and maybe if they've read a few books, risk neutral. So we have three or four kind of positions, but the truth is that each of those is a complete spectrum. There's a whole range of possible levels of risk aversion. You can be extremely risk averse, which we might call paranoid. Actually, paranoia is a type of risk aversion, and it's a mental state which we don't want to get into. You can have different degrees of risk aversion. You can have different degrees of risk tolerance or degrees of risk seeking. And so we have a whole range, a risk attitude spectrum, we might call it, where against any given risky situation, people could adopt a whole range of different responses. So if I said to you, why don't we go bungee jumping? How do you feel about that? We'll do that this afternoon. It'll be much more interesting than staying in the office. You might say, fantastic, let's go. And I might say, I'm not really sure about that. It's the same risky situation, but our attitudes are different. One we might characterize as risk-seeking and the other might be risk-averse. But the reality is that there's a whole range of things that people could adopt across that spectrum.
And what is it that influences us to adopt different risk attitudes in a particularly risky situation?
There are very many different influences. I think we can usefully categorize them into three different types. One we might call conscious, one we could call subconscious, and one we might call affective. Now let's take those in turn. Conscious is to do with the things that you can see and measure, a rational assessment of the situation. We can do a risk-reward balance, we can do a cost-benefit analysis, we can assess the level of risk and the level of exposure and come up with some numbers. We could do pairwise comparisons, weighted criteria, all sorts of different ways of consciously assessing the risk and helping us to make a decision. But conscious assessment is only part of the story. We also have a whole range of subconscious things that influence the way we think, things that influence the way we judge. There are two types of subconscious influences. One are heuristics and the other are cognitive biases. Heuristics are mental shortcuts that we use to get to an answer quickly when we either don't have time or we don't have full information. And there are about 15 different heuristics. But one, for example, might be availability. How easy is it to remember something? If it's available to your memory, it's a strong influence when you come to another similar situation. Or there might be groupthink. That's another heuristic. If everybody else says it's true, well, it must be true. So we have these heuristics, or cognitive bias, familiarity, I know how to do this, or propinquity, it's close to me and therefore it matters more. So we have a whole range of subconscious influences as well. So conscious and subconscious. And then this area called affective, which is about emotions and feelings. Now, of course, we don't have those because we're English. And, the British don't have feelings, stiff upper lip and all of that sort of thing. Of course, we do have feelings. It's just that we don't take them to work, do we? Well, actually, we do take them to work, and they influence our view of uncertainty in ways that we don't see and we don't understand. So if I'm cross, or if I'm depressed, or if I'm excited, I might take more or less risk than I might do if I had a different emotional state. So subconscious, conscious and affective factors all combine together in a fairly complex web of influences to influence the way that we look at an uncertain situation and as a result how we react to it in our chosen risk attitude.
So are we victims of our risk attitudes, or can we influence them? Can we change them?
There is a kind of gut reaction that comes immediately when you face an uncertain situation and you kind of just react habitually or react intuitively. And of course that might be right. So it might be that I feel very worried about this and I should be worried and I should be risk averse. But sometimes our gut reaction, our first thought, isn't the one that's going to help us get to where we want to be. So if I need to take a chance in my project, if I need to approach the client and ask him some difficult question or renegotiate my contract, I need to stand up to some team member who's being difficult, and I feel very nervous about that, that's not going to help me to achieve my goals. So we need to find some way of managing our risk attitudes. And I have a very simple approach which uses 6 words starting with the letter A. And it's based on applied emotional intelligence or applied emotional literacy. The first 2 A's are awareness and appreciation. So I have to know what risk attitude I'm displaying, what's coming out. And then the second thing, awareness, appreciation, is where's that coming from? Why am I feeling like that? Is it some rational assessment? Is there some subconscious driver? Or is it my emotional state which is driving me to this risk attitude? The third A is assessment. So once I know what my attitude is and where it's come from, I need to ask the question, is this appropriate? Is it helping me to go where I want to go or not? And if my assessment is that this initial risk attitude is okay, then another A is to accept that risk attitude and go with it. But it might not be okay, in which case I need to use the other emotional literacy techniques of assertion and action, to state the need for change and to take the actions that lead to change. So basically what we're doing is saying, let's see what comes out, let's be aware of how I'm reacting naturally, and I either go with it or I don't. We can manage our risk attitudes through a fairly structured process of being aware and appreciating, assessing the risk attitude and either accepting it or asserting the need for change and taking action to change it.
And have you got an example from an organisation where this has been an important factor?
This operates on at least 2 different levels. One is the personal level, and so you can coach a project manager who is being overcautious or over-adventurous, and you can see how that might be useful for a particular individual. But it also operates on the group level. So either a whole team or a management board or senior management executive might well be worrying too much or worrying too little and making inappropriate decisions. So I was working with the board of a major mining company, and they had recently had a very difficult experience with a particular country where they'd had an investment that didn't go exactly as they intended. There'd been a little bit of reputation impact, certainly some technical and financial impacts. And now they had another investment opportunity, and the board was being coloured by this previous experience. And we had to work with them in a fairly gentle but firm way to say, why are you responding like this? Is it what happened previously in this other country? Is that colouring your judgment? Why? Is it appropriate? Is it helpful? And if not, how can we change it? So we coached them through that 6 A's process to understand what they were doing and why, and then make a different judgment. And whereas they were just about to say, we can't afford to invest in this second country because we've just had a bad experience, we helped them to see that in fact that would be a good decision to make because the two situations were unrelated.